Welcome back, everyone. In Module 3, we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of how to evaluate and review existing research, which is an incredibly important first and ongoing step in your own research process. We'll start by evaluating sources, where your information is coming from. As you'll see, these guidelines apply not just to this course and your final project, but also to your daily life. So feel free to spread the good word with your family and friends. So before you proceed with this lecture, go ahead and read the articles posted right under it with the links to Kelly Brogan's article and Hooker 2014 article, or else the next few slides will not really make sense to you. As a disclaimer, I've probably already made it clear in earlier lectures that I don't think there is sufficient evidence to link vaccines causally to autism, but I'm going to approach this discussion with neutrality on the issue itself and talk more generally about the quality of sources of information. And I'll just let you know now that there are really bad quality and really good quality sources usually on both sides of controversial debates. So I kind of gave it away, but the main question here is, how do you tell a good, reliable source of information from a bad and unreliable one? So we really have to consider this when we look at previous research. The first guideline is, how you come across the information matters. And the overall tip is to use neutral search terms on a reputable database or website. That means not Google. So here, if we are talking about the vaccine autism link, as you'll see on your screen, we're taking the convenient step of going straight to Google. Bad idea. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Google, which I think is one of the greatest technological and social agents of our time. And it gives you access to a lot of great high-quality information. But with the good will also be a lot of bad. And it's not always easy to tell which is which. So starting with Google is mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was to use keywords that were already biased. So the words vaccine cover-up sound kind of conspiracy theory-like, right? Well, it's going to give you a very specific set of results. You're setting yourself up to selectively hear only the side of the story you searched for. And because you searched for it, most of your search results will likely confirm what you already started believing. Now, this is not good science. This is like starting with the idea that chocolate makes you thinner and younger, and then working backwards from there. So the first hit from the search is what I had you guys read, Kelly Brogan's article, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. So how do we avoid these pitfalls? I would specifically recommend that you bypass Google and go directly to a trusted website such as the CDC website, NIH, for basic background reading, if you want to orient yourself to a health topic. And by the way, there will be a list of links to these types of websites at the bottom of Module 3. If you want to get deeper into a topic and conduct a formal literature review, use trusted databases such as PubMed, which holds peer-reviewed scientific articles that you will need for your research and for your review. And again, there will be a list of these links at the bottom of Module 3. Only go back to Google, and by which I mean Google Scholar, as in scholar.google.com, if you need to access articles you already know exist but can't get access to, or to otherwise supplement your core search. The second guideline is, ask yourself the 5 W's about the source. And if you're going to a website or other source of information for the first time, including an in-person conversation with someone who you don't know very well or you don't know about their credentials very well, start with a suspicious attitude. So what are the 5 W's? First of all, who? Who runs the website or wrote the article? What are their credentials? You wouldn't necessarily take cancer advice from Dr. Phil. So ask yourself, what's this person's educational background? What are their experiences and what's their expertise that gives them authority on the topic at hand? And then ask again, what are their credentials really? In this case, for the article that I had you read, we do have an author who is a medical doctor who seems to have some legitimate training from reputable, very reputable institutions, as you can see in the snapshot here from her bio. She is a psychiatrist with additional training in holistic medicine. But when you start looking at her publications, I was not so thrilled. Because if you look at the list and just glance over it, it looks like she's a well-published scientific authority. But if you look closer, many of the articles are written for blogs and magazines that are not peer-reviewed. A peer-reviewed scientific article means that before an article was published, other scientists who are considered experts in that topic anonymously review the paper to make sure the authors did their job correctly, and they provide very specific and very detailed feedback before they allow the journal to publish the article. So I, as someone who has been on both sides of that process, as both an author and a reviewer, I can tell you that it's a very rigorous process. And I'll admit that other scientists have caught mistakes in my papers or critiqued the way that I conducted my analyses or the way that I interpreted my results. And in the end, my reports were so much better because of their feedback. And that's how the scientific community sort of checks and balances itself to make sure that consumers get only rigorous science and only really good information. And many of the articles listed here under Kelly Brogan's publications are not peer-reviewed. So there's no scientific vetting process that makes sure she is actually backed up by rigorously conducted science on the vaccine autism topic. Next, ask yourself what exactly is the article claiming? And what does the website or article promise? Watch out for slam dunk headlines like cancer cured. Yeah, cancer is not that simple. Or how about one simple trick to reduce stomach fat by 80% without dieting or exercising? Yeah, if something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Or how about this? CDC, you're fired. Autism cover-up exposed. Ooh, that sounds pretty extreme. And also, note that this article was published 2 years ago, and the CDC still clearly exists. So what is going on here? Basically, my rule of thumb is if an article says that something has been proven or cured or promises to totally solve a problem or expose a conspiracy, I read it with caution, and I don't believe it until I've seen evidence from multiple reputable sources. In health and social sciences, it's extremely rare and difficult to prove anything, so this word should be a red flag. Also, ask yourself when, as in when was the information posted or reviewed? Is it up to date? Is there more recent information to challenge it? If we believed outdated science, we might think that the shape of our skull still determines our personality. So it's important to check what the most recent scientific consensus is. In our example here, the when is actually where the article really tripped up. When you find the link to the original article, research article that is the basis for Kelly Brogan's article, which you hopefully also read, you'll see that the article has actually been retracted. If you're really perceptive, you'll have noticed that there's a huge retracted watermark on the original article. And specifically, the retraction notice says, this article has been removed from the public domain because of serious concerns about the validity of its conclusions. The journal and publisher believe that its continued availability may not be in the public interest. And we need to heed those warning words because basically they mean that what you're about to read is not reliable by scientific peer review standards, and that the editors have enough reason to doubt the integrity of the authors or the research methods that they can't publish it in good conscience. Next, ask yourself where. Specifically, where did the information come from? Is it published by an individual or a reputable organization that is accountable to other authorities? In part, that's because these organizations include many scientists who serve as checks and balances to each other. It's easy for one lone wolf to go rogue, but it's less likely for every scientist at, say, the World Health Organization to go rogue at the same time and in the same direction. In your literature search, if you find that you keep seeing the same authors' names come up again and again, make a point to include other researchers' work in your review too. And there are some specific ways to tell whether the information is based on good science when it comes to where the information comes from. So, for example, if the web page or the article does not have a references list at the bottom, it's not reliable. Even if it does, make sure the references are from scientific journals. And you can tell this because the citations will include the journal name in the citation, in the reference list, and these journals usually are named something like Journal of such and such, Annals of such and such, something something bulletin, something something reviews. So these are the format of usually what scientific journals sound like. Also, .org, .gov, and .edu websites are generally more reliable than .com websites, and that's because anyone can make a .com website, but you have to go through a pretty rigorous vetting process to be able to call yourself a .org, .gov, or .edu. Last but certainly not least, ask yourself why the information is provided. Why does the site exist? Is it selling something? Is it an activist group whose mission is to convince you of an unpopular stance on an issue? Don't get me wrong, there are many activist groups out there with really important and very good missions that are backed up by science and facts, and many that aren't as legitimate, but still probably have some truth to them. But you have to take information published by activists with a grain of salt, because after all, if their stance was already well established, they wouldn't be trying to convince you. Here are some additional tips for how to assess the quality of information. For example, if the page has a comment section where anyone can post a comment at the bottom about the article that purports to be about a scientific or health news or fact, then the article and the comments are not reliable. Because trust me, no scientist is thinking, okay, here are the facts based on my rigorous research that I've done for years and years. What do you think, random people of the internet? And two, if the article is 100% sure of what they're claiming, it's not reliable. And I know this sounds really strange, but no scientist is 100% sure about their findings. Statistics are reported in confidence intervals because there is always some possibility that the findings occurred randomly by chance. Even findings for which there is extremely high confidence and the researchers are convinced in their heart of hearts that it's true, they wouldn't say it's settled, it's been proven conclusively. In fact, scientists almost never use the words proven or conclusive. Even the most self-assured scientists still call for independent replication studies and call for future directions to further elaborate their results. Another important point is if the article uses very emotional or otherwise provocative language, it's not reliable. It would be very unprofessional for a scientific article to use emotional or provocative language because science is supposed to be a cool and rational process. If an article uses colorful imagery, they're probably going for an oversimplified and sensationalized version of the truth. And that's not what you need for your literature review and for your life. Lastly, if the page has advertisements, the information published is not reliable, or at least not reliable enough to cite in a scientific paper. If the page has advertisements, that means either the website itself is trying to sell you something, or the person who made the website is making money from traffic to the website. You can increase the number of clicks to your website if your claims are really sensational or really controversial. Meanwhile, nobody is necessarily monitoring whether your claims are true. So I would be wary of websites that sell advertising space. Now let's come back to our example article by Kelly Brogan. Just taking a snapshot of the first couple of paragraphs and the title of this article, we've got emotional language. In fact, the very first line of the article is fraud, a powerful accusation, sensational, provocative. The very words that are used here are sensational and provocative. And we've got a very emotionally inducing picture here. We've got strong claims about information that is supposed to be 100% true, and even true to the point of being primal instinct. And I couldn't fit the whole screen on here, but there is also an advertisement for a book that the author is selling off to the side of this article. And there was a pretty colorful comment section. What you see here were probably some of the less colorful comments. So basically, this article raises all of my red flags. And whether or not the information at its core is true, I would never operate as if it is true or reliable. In other words, if I were writing a scientific paper, I would never use this information in my review of what is the current state of the knowledge on this topic, or use it to make up the rationale for my research question or hypotheses. Okay, so this was quite a bit of tightly packed information. So let's take a break first before we get to evaluating scientific findings once you found them from a good source.